Good evening. Today is March 12th, 2021, and this is the 47th episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. My guest today is a dear friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Michael Yon. Mike is America's most experienced living combat correspondent who is coming to us today from Panama, where he is covering the migration surge and also the human tragedy that is affecting the U.S. southern border. No other writer has spent as much time with combat troops in both Iraq and Afghanistan as Michael has. Mike's dispatches really have earned him the reputation as the premier independent combat writer of our generation. His work has been featured on Good Morning America, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNN, ABC, Fox, as well as numerous other major media outlets around the world. Before we go in and talk to Mike today, I want to make sure we preview some of the work that he has done covering various different crises around the world.
This is it. This is storming the castle.
Some drama's going on down here. They need oil. Look at the squeaking armor from the police. They don't have their masks on.
Mike, is wonderful to have you here, buddy. Again, that was some of the work that Mike has done. That was basically his work in Taiwan, and now he's in Panama covering what is coming across from the southern border. Mike, it's good to have you here, buddy. How's everything down in Panama?
It's great to be on, Sargis. And you can see I'm doing the floating head thing because there's no moon tonight. It's less than 1% illumination. I'm in a place called El Valle, Panama. It's actually a volcano crater in central Panama. I will be later this week going back out to the Darien Gap into the jungle. I'll be out there. I may have no communications at all for 3 to 5 days, depending on, I don't know what it'll be like out there. I'll be staying with Indians, literal Indians, Imbara Indians, and doing more research on migration. For those who don't know what the Darien Gap is, I was just down there recently with Chuck Bolton, the famous war correspondent. We were actually in Washington, D.C. together for some of the mayhem, and then we both separately we met in Texas at El Paso, went into Mexico together, just the north part, across, day trips, and then New Mexico, and did the same. We were along the border, and I shot up to Portland and watched the Antifa guys do their insanity. And then shot down to Colombia because this migration issue is such a huge issue. If you look at Colombia is the northernmost country in South America. So Colombia is that top country there in South America, and you can see on a map how it connects with Panama on the isthmus there. And so at that little junction there that you see on the globe, that's called the Darien Gap, because there's a highway that goes, or a system of highways that goes all the way from Alaska down to Tierra del Fuego, down to the bottom of South America, and it's uninterrupted except for one gap there at the Darien Gap, which is about 70 miles uninterrupted jungle, right? So that highway is only interrupted by, it's so dark out here, there's no moon tonight, you can see. So you see, if you see any lights in the background, that's this very town lights. And so you hear these jungle sounds. That's not canned music. That's actually what's going on. And so, but so that Darien Gap is the migrants who go into South America. For instance, if they're from India, if they're from Afghanistan, or from China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Africa, like Congo, and that sort of thing, they all will go to South America first, and they'll go to countries like Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, especially Ecuador and Brazil. Then they'll feed up there, look at the map, they'll go through Colombia, and then they leave the road on Columbia, and then they walk for about a week through the Darien Gap, in which many die. Almost everybody is almost all the females will be raped. Everybody is robbed. We've been tracking one group that we met in Colombia just as they entered the Darien Gap, and we went into the jungle there, and we actually went in for only about a kilometer. Then we flew ahead to Panama. We flew ahead from Colombia to Panama to intercept them, and so we're actually tracking them still. So they made it in their group of about 70 to 80. It's hard to say how many's in the group because the groups kind of spread out and gather with other groups and that sort of thing while they're in the jungle. But about 11 died. One drowned, 2 were swept away in a river, so 3 drowned. And then 2 pregnant women died, a 10-month-old baby died, and none were murdered in that group. They were all robbed, some were raped, but they died from illnesses, 3 from drowning, and then others from some sort of illness. And I'm just going to take a wild guess that it was waterborne, because water gets a lot of people as they cross through Darien Gap. And they make it into Panama. They always get picked up by what's called Cinefront. That's the Panamanian border police. They're called Cinefront. So Cinefront detains everybody, puts them in camps, and processes them, because there's no way to get by them, actually, because you're coming in very funneled in from the jungle at Darien Gap. They will hold them for a while, then they push them up in buses that are paid for by the government, and then they go up to Costa Rica, to that border, and then they go into the Costa Rica. From Costa Rica, they'll go to Nicaragua. Nicaragua, they continue to go north to Honduras, then to Guatemala, and then at Guatemala, they will cross at a place called Tapachula in Mexico, and that's like, Tapachula is the southernmost city in Mexico, and it's almost like the El Paso of Mexico, except it's on the Mexico southern border with Guatemala, and there's literally a river there, like the Rio Grande, except it's smaller. But they'll come over on inner tubes that have pallets strapped to the top, or in this case, it's still a little dry there, so they walked across. The group that we're tracking now. In fact, I just got a message from one of them about an hour ago. She's 16 years old. She's with her 12-year-old brother and her mother. They're from Haiti. They lived in Chile for a couple of years, and then when Biden took office, that was their starting gun. Bang! So they made a run. They left their life in Chile. They'd been there a couple of years, and they had, like, the 16-year-old girl, she's got an iPhone. Her mother had a Samsung. It's not like they were, totally, I mean, they were clearly well-fed and that sort of thing. They had nice clothes, but they were going into the Darien Gap. Well, they made it through, and now they're actually in Mexico. So now they're going to have to spend probably 3 to 4 months in Mexico. Nobody knows. They don't know. And doing a lot of paperwork for the Mexicans. And then they will finally, you see your map there is Panama, and you can see where Panama is written, not Panama City. I'm not near Panama City, but you see where the word Panama is written. I'm just about there right now. But later this week, I'm going to head to the right there, which is past Panama City. I'm going back into the Darien Gap. But anyway, they had, they're up in Tapachula filling out paperwork, and eventually, if they are cleared through Mexico, then they'll shoot for the U.S. border. And many of the Haitians will try to cross near places like San Diego in particular. Other groups, once they get into Mexico, they split out. Different sorts of groups will go in different directions. Like you saw some Iranians just got captured in Arizona when I was there, actually in Arizona. I wasn't there when they captured them. I was somewhere else in Arizona. We were doing border stuff, but we weren't there. I think, what did they get, 14 or 13 Iranians? And then they, different groups will go with different sorts of coyotes, because for those who've traveled the world backpacking like I did when I was younger, you'll know that there's like the Lonely Planet guidebook that everybody follows. Well, these migrants have their own sort of, underground railroad of sort of quote unquote Lonely Planet, where they'll use the coyotes that, like for instance, down in Tapachula. In Tapachula, if you look that up, that's the southernmost city in Mexico. And that town, there's so many migrants that come through from all over the world that they have ethnic restaurants. For instance, they have Indian restaurants for the Indian migrants, Bangladeshi, Nepalese. They have some African restaurant there that serves African cuisine, which Africa is a big place, so I'm sure there's many types of African cuisine. But so there's so many migrants that come through from so many places around the world that there's actually an ethnic restaurant subculture there. So that's how serious it is. This is like a real migration route that's really set, and it has been set for many years, but now it's just been activated very high voltage since Biden has taken office. You know, I was there at the inauguration. I was there for the Capitol attack, actually. I didn't go inside, but I was there as a war correspondent watching the mayhem, and then was there for the inauguration, which, such as it was, they put up a lot of fence for that inauguration, that's for sure. Miles of fencing for that inauguration, and 26,000 or some odd troops, probably at least that many law enforcement. We shot straight over to El Paso, and within days of Biden taking office, just days, people were starting to flood the border already. And they were explicit why they were doing it, because Biden was president. And so it created this human osmotic pressure, HOP, I call it, human osmotic pressure. You know, there's the positive pressure. If they're coming from a war, it pushes people out. Let's say Armenia, right? So that pushes people out. And then there's the negative pressure, which draws people in. Now, keep in mind, I've been in a lot of the countries where they're from. As you know, I spent most of my life overseas. And for instance, I met some Nepalese up there. I had been right to the area where their village is at. There's no war there now. It's not like they're fleeing from a war in Nepal. I met a Sikh man from India. In fact, I saw him up in the jungle on the Colombian side of it. I was like, Sikh man, you know, he's up the hill, and I walked up to him, huffing and puffing. And I was like, oh, you're from Punjab. And he's like, how do you know I'm from Punjab? You know, and what's this white guy out in the jungle knows I'm a Sikh from Punjab? And he wasn't wearing his turban either. And I said, well, I've been to Punjab. You know, so I've been to where they're from, where many of them are from. And I'm quite familiar, right? And they're not all fleeing war. Many people are doing what you and I do. We go to play. Look what SpaceX is doing. SpaceX is talking about moving from California to Texas because of human osmotic pressure. You know, the blue state, blue shift, get out of there, right? I mean, so the human osmotic pressure is something we all are apt to do. It's not their fault. They're doing what we would do, and which is the smart thing. Take your family and go somewhere better. Now, with those good people like Medice, she's 16, with her 12-year brother, his name is Michael, and her mother, they're clearly just a Haitian family that want to go to a better life. And they're quite nice, very well-educated people. I like them, actually. And I mean, I don't see them as any danger to the United States. At the same time, sprinkled in there, as we know, what do American criminals do? American criminals are famous for heading down south of the border. The first thing they do when they commit some bank robbery or crime is head to Mexico, right? So the same thing goes, you know, both directions. So we've got, you know, American criminals shoot out and head south, and we've got also people running from their own countries for whatever reason, criminality, or they may be coming to the United States literally on a mission from a foreign country. So I mean, it's all mixed in together. So we've got these really good people that are just taking their family to a nicer place. We've got other straight up criminals. We've got children that are kidnapped. We've got human trafficking at epic proportions. We've got drug smuggling, cartels running a lot of this human trafficking. It's all part of the mixture. And to categorize everybody that's coming across as running from a war, that's just simply false. In fact, I can confidently say that the vast majority are not running from any war. In fact, as Medice, the 16-year-old, and her 12-year-old brother and her mother, they came from Haiti. They were 2 years in Chile. Chile's quite peaceful. They had a job. Their mother had a job and that sort of thing. They had to come through Ecuador. Just look at the map. Ecuador is very peaceful. You don't even need a visa to go to Ecuador. Americans go live in Chile and Ecuador and Colombia. You got Americans that literally have left the United States, and they live in Ecuador, and they live in Chile, and they live in Colombia, right? And they live here in Panama, right? And so these people that supposedly are running from war are going through all these peaceful countries like Chile, Ecuador, Colombia, here in Panama. Panama is great. They go from Panama, they go up to Costa Rica. Costa Rica is more expensive to travel in than Florida. I'm from Florida. I mean, it's like Costa Rica. I've spent 3 months there. That place is nice. They go through Costa Rica. They go up through Nicaragua. Can be a little bit more dicey in Nicaragua, but there's also a lot of very safe places. And they, of course, head to Honduras. Honduras has got some very dangerous places. It's also got places where people go on vacations, and Americans also go there and live, right? As do many Europeans. Then they go up to Guatemala. Likewise, there are very dangerous parts of Guatemala, and then there are parts where Americans literally go on vacation, right? So it's not, and then Mexico. How many Americans live in Mexico? So then they travel all through Mexico. Of course, there's war going on in Mexico, but there's also huge amounts of peace going on. Likewise with the United States. If you come to the United States and you move to certain parts of the United States right now, you're apt to be killed. As we know, look what's happening in certain parts of Minnesota at this time. So to categorize one of these countries as, they're running from Godzilla, if they don't run, they're going to get crushed by the foot or burned by the breath, is just completely untrue. They go through thousands of miles of peaceful area where the people are not hurting them, but this human osmotic pressure, the negative pressure that draws them in is the promise, whether it's true or not, that they're going to get, once they get to the border, everything's going to be fine. But a lot of these people don't seem to realize that when you come into the United States border at this point, many are just going to get through, and they're going to end up in Chicago, next week. Others will be detained for indefinite periods during this COVID lockdown. As you know what's happening. Everybody's packed in there like COVID sardines, gestating more, incubating more COVID and various strains. I just finished my 51st book, reading my 51st book on pandemic, by the way. This last one was on Ebola, and the one before that was tuberculosis, right? And so I read a lot. Since I'm a war correspondent, I read tons about pandemic. That's why I was so far ahead on this pandemic. Like in January of 2020, I was masked up on about January 11th, right? Because I do pay attention to, because these things, you're a retired military officer. What goes together? War, pandemic, famine. That's like the devil's triangle. War, pandemic, famine. If you get a big pandemic, you will get a war, and you will get a famine, right? If it's a big one, not small ones. If you get a big war, or you get a big pandemic, or you get a big famine, you'll get the other two. And then with this will come human migration. And as you know, human migration often you're basically tracking pandemic with you. So there are now resistant strains of tuberculosis, especially, across Africa and in Asia and other places. And many of these people are just right here in this valley where I'm at right now in El Valle in Panama. There's many people with tuberculosis, right? So this is tracking straight up into the United States, and it is there. It's not coming, it's there. It's in Colorado. It's in Texas. It's in this. Tuberculosis has killed, a lot of people don't realize this. They've kind of forgotten about tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is one of the worst diseases that has ever hit mankind. COVID is a joke compared to tuberculosis, right? I mean, I'm not saying COVID is not serious. I was one of the first ones wearing a mask, but we're overstating it, we're overblowing it, and they're blowing it completely out of proportion. But tuberculosis, we got it under control at this time, and so people have forgotten about it. But tuberculosis is one of the most serious diseases that has ever hit mankind. And with every passing day, there are more people out there with resistant strains of tuberculosis, and they're coming north. They're coming straight through right where I'm at now on the Pan Am Highway. That's the artery. And they're going straight up into Texas and New Mexico, Arizona, and California. And then bang, 2 days later, they're all over the United States and Canada. So, this is very serious. And some of these, people are going, crazy on the COVID thing. And I'm not saying you shouldn't take COVID seriously. I'm not saying that at all. At the same time, it's obviously been misused and blown out of proportion while we have this stealth diseases like tuberculosis that are creeping right in with resistant strains. This is no joke. We need to pay attention.
No, look, Mike, you covered a lot of it there. I mean, I myself was in Panama years ago when I was getting through the jungle warfare center in school. And I got to tell you, when you're out there late in the evening, You know, those bats are trying to numb you up, bite you. You can't even sleep on the ground because the ants can be all over you. You got the howling monkeys that are trying to steal your equipment. You go past any location where you may be cutting through the brush and you cut through a red or a yellow frog, a tiny frog. You could have poison all over your blades. That's why cleaning our equipment was such of importance when we cleaned our equipment there, and then when we came back to the States with the U.S. military, we had to re-clean our equipment. I had issues of soldiers even dying after they came back because once they cut themselves, the poison was still on the machete that they had used in the jungle. They didn't clean it too well, and they ended up dying. We had water moccasins that the rotation before I went down years ago now, of course. Young lieutenant got hit by a water moccasin nest and was absolutely, tore up, found his body floating 5 days later. So that was a jungle. I mean, you mentioned the Darien Gap. I mean, literally, you're going through that jungle. So as a serviceman, with everything that we had, it was very dangerous. Imagine these individuals are sending their teenagers to negotiate that terrain, and if they're not used to going through that gap and through that terrain, it's very difficult. I mean, I had heat casualties within hours of being on the ground with my guys. It's just, that jungle can absolutely zap you. You're talking about the various different diseases. Look, in the service, caught tuberculosis when I was in Korea. It's the reality. My soldier, one of my NCOs caught malaria when he was on operations in Africa. I myself caught the bird flu when I was in Thailand. I was the first bird flu case here just 3 to 4 years ago when I came back from Thailand. So there's a lot of stuff when you're a soldier, you're out there in the various different environments that you pick up, even though U.S. military puts a heavy emphasis on vaccinating you, getting you prepared for it. Now imagine these individuals that you just described coming to that Darien Gap, and they haven't gotten those shots. They're not prepared for it. Hardly maybe they got any money in their pockets to be able to negotiate that terrain. And now you got this pipeline that everybody who can make money off of these individuals is set up, whether it be the non-for-profit organizations are getting money funding to their pockets so they could say that we're doing something for folks that are coming up north, or you have various different coyotes are operating there, the narco terrorists that are operating using that route. I've had buddies with the U.S. Border Patrol who said that the biggest runners that exist when these coyotes are coming across the border are the ones who are actually running, unfortunately, human organs across the border. Now, those human organs can only get transplanted one place, and those are in the U.S. hospitals. So you have to kind of wonder who the heck is the buyer and how are they making it into the major U.S. hospitals and being transplanted, and individuals are waiting here in the U.S. on those donor lists. So it's unfortunate, but it has become very much of an economic boom for the people who are making money off of this, and the politicians, doesn't seem like from what you're saying, have done anything to resolve it. Let me ask you a question. What do you think? Do you think the search will continue on, given the fact that it doesn't seem like the current administration wants to make any changes anyway? Or do you think there might be just an issue of a seasonal migration right now where you may see a slowdown in the numbers as the summer months become hotter, especially when it comes to the Darien Gap?
I think it'll continue. I think it'll definitely continue. For many reasons. One is that as long as the negative side of the human economic pressure is there, for instance, they feel that they can get into the United States and then everything will be nice. There's that side of the equation is a done deal. So then it's just a matter of can they get to a start point, which is like, for instance, South America or anywhere in Central America or Mexico, of course, and then bang, off they go. And so keep in mind, they're not always dealing with perfect information either. They're dealing with, some of the people that are coming across are clearly more sophisticated than others. Some are clearly just coming on emotion and rumor, and others, like the Sikh man that I met, he was an engineer actually. We talked for quite a while out in the jungle. He's clearly an educated man. He he had an idea what lay ahead of him, but others just seemed to have no idea what they were going to do next. I mean, they were figuring it out step by step. So, I mean, I don't see any abatement happening at all. There's no, what is there to assuage us? You know, I see a lot of my American friends and associates who are constantly surprised at what happens next, right? And they're surprised, right? If you're surprised at things, it's because your paradigm is off. In other words, your worldview is wrong. So I'm constantly trying to rework my paradigm so that I'm not surprised by things. This is why I've been so successful in various wars and conflicts, such as whether it's Hong Kong or Thailand or Afghanistan, Iraq, those sorts of things, is because I'm constantly reshaping my paradigm so that I'm not surprised anymore. So I would not be surprised at this time if, for instance, in the future, Biden starts to literally tear down the wall, or people within his circle start to say, let's tear down the wall, right? I would not be surprised at all, because that fits my paradigm. My paradigm is the people that are, of course, there's many different groups. This is a multiplayer game. It's not like there's just, one bad guy out there that's running everything, like the Wizard of Oz. It's a multiplayer game. People all over the world and within the United States are involved. And many of those people clearly wish to see the United States fall into civil war, as an example, or they're willing to do anything to get power, right? There's different groups that are there for their own reasons, and different individuals for their own reasons, just like there's different people that are doing migration for their own causes, right? So I would not be surprised. Nothing would surprise me at this point when Americans are continuously surprised that this administration does things that, for instance, seem to be leading into civil war. That does not surprise me, because it's very clear that there are hidden hands out there that are not very well hidden, that are clearly trying to push us into internal war. And it's working. I've spent years in wars. My track record is extremely good on nobody can predict the future. Nobody can. But what I can do, I know a hurricane when I see one, right? I don't know which way it's going to go, but I know what hurricanes do, right? And I can see, for instance, now a clear march into war within the United States. It's obvious, right? The conditions are set, right? People are saying, what will the spark be? And I say, it doesn't matter what the spark will be. I'm looking at the dry forest. Is the forest, are rains coming? Are things getting better? Or is it still drying out? Is it, drying more? Is more of the forest drying? Is it becoming drier, right? The forest is becoming drier in the United States. The conditions are set for civil conflict and internal civil war. So with that in mind, it doesn't matter what, the spark will come. There's always sparks in a rainforest, but the forest doesn't catch on fire when people are out there shooting fireworks, as they do here in El Valle all the time. And it doesn't matter if somebody's house burns down, it's not going to cause half of Panama to burn down. But when you're in a forest fire situation, throw out a cigarette or anything like that, the next thing you know, you got a huge forest fire. That's what we got going on in the United States. Some of the things that add to that conflict, or the potential for civil war in the United States, are just unfettered immigration. It is insane to do this unless you want to create the conditions of civil war. If you want to do that, it makes perfect sense. If you want to create the conditions for civil war in the United States, you will do things that damage the economy. You will do things that damage people's trust within the judicial system. So that they don't trust the FBI or the judges or the Supreme Court or or any of the elected officials. That's what you would do if you were trying to create a civil war. You would do everything possible to create a feeling of unease.
Now, look, Mike, I think people think that, and that's why I call the show The New Paradigms, because people who haven't served, those small percentages of Americans have served in the U.S. military, and even today, smaller, less than most in the military have actually seen combat. You and I have both fought against insurgencies, seen them hand in hand in leading one when we were fighting against ISIS in 2014 to 2017. So when we're talking about our experience based on what we've seen on the battlefield and reality of how it operates. Nothing really has changed, and the operation when it comes to running insurgency. There's a large belief for some that the political party faction is much more important than Americans' larger interest, and that will do anything to ensure that they can stay in power, or at least have their party's voice heard for generations to come. I mean, look, you got guys that are getting in process coming in that are actually now filling out even paperwork unknown to them that they're declaring that they are registered voters for a certain party. And that shouldn't happen. That's not part of a process where you should be coming into the country, going through the immigration process and signing those documents. And there's a large portion of people in D.C. that says if you can ever get those people flipped, and we could give them any type of amnesty, not just pathway to citizenship that they have to earn, then nobody can ever pry them away from that political party for generations to come. They'll be beholden to them as a slave would be beholden to a master. And now you have one party rule in the United States. And I think that's what some are trying to achieve, and they're pretty successful as far as pushing it for now. Hoping that in 2024, they remain in power and push whatever agenda that they have for the country. But I always tell folks, be very careful, because if you don't give a voice for the other side, eventually you might not like the way they may express themselves.
Right. Well, Sargis, I have to go. And actually, I feel rain coming as well. I'm outside, as you can see. And I don't know if you can hear the wind, but you can hear it kind of picking up. It's about to knock the camera over as well.
Well, Mike, we got it.
I can come on
we're at
anytime.
No, we're at the tail end of it, buddy. I know, and those thunderstorms come in Panama. You get a chic shelter. So we're gonna let you go. With that said, we're gonna put up where guys can see your QR code if they want to read more about you, and then we're probably gonna have you back again, Mike, sooner than later. And make sure you tell Chuck he's coming on the show too. I've been on the show before, but we gotta get him back here, maybe both of you in the near future. Okay, buddy?
I'll see Chuck in about 5 minutes. I'll tell him.
Okay, outstanding. Go do your man's work and stay safe, guys. Okay, God bless.
Thanks, Sargis.
And there's new paradigms.
Bye. Bye, Sargis.
Bye, guys.
The situation is so bad at the southern border that the Department of Health and Human Services has asked workers from other federal agencies to go to the border to help care for the thousands of illegal immigrant children being held there. The border surge is breaking records. Over 172,000 migrants were stopped at the border last month, the most in 20 years. And almost 21,000 unaccompanied minors are now in federal custody, the most ever. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says we're seeing the consequences of the Democrats' rhetoric on open borders and Joe Biden's policies.
If you go back to the Democrat presidential debates, every single one of the Democrat candidates said if they are elected, they will have open borders and they will be giving things for free to anybody coming across the border. This problem will continue to get worse because of the policies that have been adopted by the Biden administration.
Abbott points out that even some Democrats are pushing back against the Biden White House. And he says what would stop the surge would be a return to the border policies of the Trump administration. Instead, Reuters reports the Biden administration is now considering cash payouts to some Central American nations to try to improve economic conditions to help stem the surge at the border. Republican House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy blasted the idea, tweeting, "President Biden wants to try and buy our way out of his border crisis with taxpayer money. The administration is spending $60 million a week and now wants to launch a cash transfer program in Central America. This insults millions of Americans who are out of work in our country." And while Joe Biden put Kamala Harris in charge of fixing the border crisis nearly 3 weeks ago, she still hasn't held a press conference or even visited the border to see what's happening there firsthand. Dale Hurd, CBN News.